And this time I will use this map in order to show you what's going on along the other borders, not only the situation in Gaza and the south, because as of now, we are actually fighting on 3 fronts: Gaza, Lebanon, and the Golan Heights. And we'll get into details about that. So this won't be a long update, but I want to give you a tactical assessment of the situation, tell you where our troops are, what we're doing, what we are preparing for, and what it seems like our enemies are doing. First, I have to start with figures. The unimaginable figures that I'm going to say, I can hardly believe it myself that I have to say these figures, but the death toll in Israel has risen to 1,200 dead Israelis. 1,200 dead Israelis. Most of them were civilians, and there's also more than 2,700 wounded Israelis. That death toll has unfortunately, sadly, risen over the last few hours. Why does that happen? Not because there's ongoing fighting in Israel and more Israelis are killed by the hundreds, thankfully no, but because as the time goes by, we find and expose additional bodies of Israeli civilians inside communities. Today, the world could see for the first time the atrocities that happened in a small Israeli community, which I'll show you on the map, which is called Kfar Aza. It's located very close to the Gaza Strip, very close to the northern part of the Gaza Strip, and it was home to lovely people who believed in peace, coexistence, people whom I know, because I have friends who are in that kibbutz, they had friends in Gaza, and they believed that one day we could have peace with Gaza, and even employed Gazan workers in the kibbutz during these last years. So really kind, warm people. And today, the international media was granted access to go in and see the sad, brutal reality of what happened in Kfar Aza. And unfortunately, what happened in Kfar Aza is not the only place. It happened in Kibbutz Be'eri and in many other locations. And the pictures they're gruesome. It is similar to if you've seen a zombie movie or a war movie or something out of a video game of apocalypse, when the houses are burnt, when there's bodies on the streets, when cars are riddled with bullets, when terrorists have gone from house to house, looted, killed, executed people in their homes or as they were fleeing out, and then dragged out and taken captives lots of Israelis from that very location. And the world saw that for the first time today. If you haven't seen it, you can watch videos on it on our platforms, both on Twitter and on Facebook. And in case you're into legacy media, then everybody covered it, and you should go see it for yourself. The situation in the south is relatively stable, but there's still fighting in the south. So around the Gaza Strip, we are still encountering terrorists that are trying to attack our communities. We're deployed with lots of troops in the south, so the terrorists are able perhaps to try to attack, but at the moment they try to attack, they are met with Israeli soldiers, and the Israeli soldiers swiftly bring those attempted attacks to an end. Hamas and the Islamic Jihad have been taken a lot of initiatives. They've been using gliders for the first time. And earlier today, a few hours ago, there were reports of a glider that penetrated into Israeli territory and terrorists that made their way to an Israeli community. They were intercepted and later killed. Let me tell you a little bit about what's going on the other fronts. We haven't spoken about that before, and it's important to keep in mind that we in Israel, unfortunately, are not focused only on the south. If I zoom out on the Israel map, for those of you who haven't seen it in a while, so I'm zooming out a bit. The blue dot is Tel Aviv. That's where we are currently. We have the Gaza Strip here in the south, close to the border with Egypt. And now we will move north and I will speak about the border with Lebanon. As you can see, the border here, Lebanon to the north, Israel to the south, and the terror organization that controls southern Lebanon, and in fact all of Lebanon, is Hezbollah. And along this 80-mile long border from the Mediterranean Sea all the way up to the Hermon mountain, we have already had additional attacks made by Hezbollah and other terror organizations. There have been rockets fired at Israel, at military positions and at our civilians, anti-tank missiles, and there has been an attempt by other terrorists to infiltrate into Israel and kill Israeli civilians. Fortunately, all of those attempts have been met and dealt with by the IDF, unfortunately at a price of human life in some of these occasions. But at the end of the day, currently, the IDF is deployed along our northern border that you can see here, from Rosh Hanikra in the west all the way up to the Hermon mountain in the east, with lots of troops. We have additional infantry, special forces, artillery, tanks, air force on readiness, sending a clear message to Hezbollah that there will be no surprises along the northern front, and if they try to surprise us, we will respond very strongly. That's what's happening on the northern front with Hezbollah. On the northeastern front, and now I'm moving to the Golan Heights. I moved from the Lebanese border here, and now we're moving to the northeast, and I'm zooming in on the Golan Heights. You can see the Israeli Golan Heights here, the Sea of Galilee. In Hebrew, we call it the Kinneret, and then the border between us and Syria. Today, for the first time, rockets were fired from Syria into Israel. We don't yet know if these rockets were fired by the Syrian armed forces or by one of the different Iranian proxy organizations, the different militias that are there, or perhaps by Hezbollah. But what we do know is that we retaliated fire and that currently the situation there is stable. Of course, we have to remain vigilant on that border as well. To bring this back home, if we zoom out a bit, then you can see that we are active on three fronts. In the south, around Gaza, in the north, with the border with Lebanon, where Hezbollah is, and on the northeast with Syria. We have mobilized a lot of reserve forces, more than 300,000, and as we speak, those troops, which are infantry, armored, artillery, combat engineers, and combat intelligence, are getting ready to execute their next mission. And the mission will be to strip Hamas of all of its military capacities. In plain words, what does that mean? It means that when this war is over, Hamas won't have the ability to hurt, terrorize, or kill any Israelis again. That's the task that we've been given, and that is the task that we are preparing and going to implement. In the meanwhile, we are striking Hamas with significant power from the air, and we have struck many of Hamas's pieces of infrastructure inside Gaza. I'm talking about command centers, I'm talking about locations where they produce rockets, where they fire rockets from, or where they hide, where their operators, where their terrorists hide from our attacks, and many other locations. And we've been striking those facilities. In case you've seen footage coming out of Gaza and you ask yourself, well, this looks like civilian buildings, and why is the IDF striking civilian business? Then let me explain why. Hamas, being cowardly terrorists, they don't advertise where they are. There's no sign on a building that says, welcome to the Hamas headquarters for exporting terrorism to Israel. Welcome to the Hamas Research and Development Center. This is where we produce rockets and missiles. They don't do that. They do all of the things inside civilian buildings, and they hide behind their own civilians. We call that using civilians as human shields, which is a despicable practice. It's a war crime, and it's something that terrorists do. They try to hide behind their own civilians in order to seek refuge, and hoping that we won't try to attack them or get to them because there are civilians in the way. Let me say this. The IDF is still and will always be committed to fighting according to the established laws of armed conflict. We don't want to kill civilians. That is certainly not our goal. But what we are committed to doing is to make sure that at the end of this war, Hamas doesn't have any military capabilities to strike Israel with. And that is what we will be doing. And this time I will use this map